Hello and welcome. I am Gimba Umar. Tonight, federal government develops strategic national policy for the prosecution of corruption cases in the country. Amnesty International stages protests in the Indonesian embassy in Abuja over the execution of Nigerians convicted of drug-related offences in the Asian country. Again, the Federal High Court in Abuja affirmed Senator Ali Modu Sharif as the national chairman of the PDP. Makarfi-led caretaker committee dismisses judgment, insists its national convention next month will hold as planned. And German Chancellor Angela Merkel vows not to alter her immigration policy in the face of terror attacks by asylum seekers.
On Business News tonight, Nigeria advised to begin compliance with United Nations Energy Commission law on electricity consumption.
And in sports news, league management company finds Heartland $4.75 million for failure to provide adequate security and control their fans in the Week 28 clash against Ifeanyi Ubah.
From Abuja, Crown Prince of Benin Kingdom cautions politicians against hate speeches as the Edo State governorship election campaigns heat up.
We begin tonight with the fresh strategies being put in place by the federal government to effectively deal with the menace of corruption in the country. To this end, the Ministry of Justice has developed what it calls a national policy on prosecution. Announcing this at a meeting of the Attorneys General in Abuja, the Minister of Justice, Mr. Abubakar Malami, says that the adoption and implementation of the policy by state authorities will fast-track the prosecution of corruption and criminal cases. He appealed to states to accept the federal government's vision of tackling corruption by establishing special anti-corruption units.
From the 36 states of the Federation, Attorney Generals converged on Abuja to discuss how to improve the justice sector. The Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice advocated the restoration of public confidence in the justice sector through the speedy prosecution of cases.
The need for the governments at the federal, states and other stakeholders in the justice sector to continuously collaborate to promote the reforms of the justice system cannot be overemphasized.
The country representative of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime outlines the role of prosecutors in the fight against corruption.
To address all these emerging forms of crime, a functional, effective and fair criminal justice system is key.
At a separate meeting on the London Summit on Anti-Corruption, the Minister of Justice pledges government's commitment to accountability and transparency as a means of stemming corruption.
Nigeria has committed to specific preventive and enforcement actions as well as international cooperation actions under the country statement.
The Minister of State for Budget and National Planning confirms government's resolve to run an open government, just as the Deputy British High Commissioner to Nigeria advises political leaders to lead by example.
We're committed to ensuring that the public, the budget process from the preparation to the implementation to the monitoring and evaluation and tracking of projects is open, that it is participatory and inclusive.
It's critical that the entirety of the Nigerian system, led by the Nigerian government, lead by example by taking their own personal steps and ensuring they invest their own time.
Fighting corruption requires a holistic approach and the adoption and implementation of a national policy on prosecution by states will no doubt fast-track the prosecution of cases in Nigeria.
The President has given an assurance that lapses that have characterized Nigeria as a nation will be corrected. President Muhammadu Buhari said this today at the Villa in Abuja while receiving a team led by Dr. Seth Berkley, Chief Executive Officer of Gavi and the Global Fund. President Buhari notes that he is impressed with the patience and steadfastness of leading supporters of healthcare delivery in Nigeria despite the nation's shortcomings. He said, quote, "We are making genuine efforts to correct the lapses. "We're very serious about people behaving themselves and being accountable." End of quote. Earlier, Dr. Berkeley, who noted that the three focal points of the Buhari administration, security, economic development and anti-corruption, are critical to the future of Nigeria, raised issues over the way donor funds for health care were utilized in the past. Well, reports say that 2 of 5 Nigerians convicted of drug offences in Indonesia have been executed. They were executed by firing squad at 12:45 a.m. Friday morning, local time in Indonesia. The fate of the 10 other prisoners, also on death row, remains uncertain, though they are believed to be on the Nusa Island where the executions are taking place. The Indonesian Deputy Attorney General had earlier confirmed that there is no going back on his decision to execute the 14 people on death row for drug crimes. United Nations human rights officials have expressed deep concerns over the executions, urging Jakarta to put an end to unjust capital punishment. Meanwhile, human rights group Amnesty International has urged President Muhammadu Buhari and other global leaders to prevail on Indonesia's President Joko Widodo to stop the execution of the remaining Nigerians and 9 other convicted of crime charges. Representatives of the group staged a protest at the Indonesian embassy in Abuja, where they presented a letter to the Indonesian government. The interim country director of Amnesty International in Nigeria, Mr. Mahmoud Kamara, said that the argument to go ahead with the execution lacks merit.
This letter is basically calling on the Indonesian government to halt all plans to carry out executions of at least 5 Nigerians and 10 other people who are at imminent risk of execution in Indonesia. Now, this is not the first time that Nigerians in Indonesia are at risk of being executed. Nigerians have been executed in the past for drug-related offences, and Amnesty International opposed the death penalty under all circumstances, and we don't think that the drug-related offences are serious crimes to warrant death penalty. So we are calling on the Indonesian government, and we are also calling on all other governments across the world to abolish the death penalty. We are calling for them to change the death penalty to prison terms, especially for those who are currently at imminent risk of execution. So we want the Nigerian public, we want the Nigerian authorities to also put pressure on the Indonesian government to save the lives of these Nigerians as well as the other nationalities who are at risk of being executed.
The Special Advisor to the President on Diaspora and Foreign Affairs, Abike Dabere Erawa, joins me now on the news at 10. I want to thank you so much indeed for coming on the news. You just heard that report and what has been said so far. 2 Nigerians already executed. What do you have to say about that?
Well, it's unfortunate, it's sad, but Indonesia had made it clear for a long time that they will execute those convicted for drugs. We were in Indonesian prison, one of the prisons, as far back as 2008, with a delegation led by the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Ojo Madueke. I was there from Parliament, there was a senator there, the DGNDLA was there, and a few other people. And we went everywhere, from the executive to the judiciary, all levels of government, but they said that their laws must be enforced. And they made it clear that penalty for drugs is death. However, you know, the former president had a moratorium on death penalty. They were not executed. But the current president, President Widodo, has said drugs is taking its toll on this country and that they will face the penalty. Nigeria has appealed, UN has appealed, EU has appealed, Amnesty International has appealed, but Indonesia says no. And the time we went to Indonesian prison, we met 21 Nigerians convicted for drug-related offenses, and they said they will execute them. So with these 2 executed, there are a few more Nigerians to be executed. We keep appealing to Indonesia, but at the same time, we have to appeal to our brothers in particular to ensure that they obey the laws of every land. Once you get to Indonesia airport, it strikes you in the face. Penalty for drugs is death. And unfortunately, after our visit to the prison in 2008, more Nigerians were convicted for drug-related offenses in Indonesia. And Indonesia said to us that every other country had a penalty, death penalty. and that they were the only ones without a death penalty, and they felt they just had to put that in place. Whether capital offense is wrong or right is another subject of debate, but it's unfortunate, it's tragic, and we all hope for a second chance.
Now, for this executions that we're looking at, and now the 14 others might be executed, or going by the President Widodo's words, was the Nigerian government contacted ahead of these executions?
I'm not sure in particular that Nigerian government were contacted that they will execute or they have executed. I don't think so. I don't think there's an official communication to that effect, but they had informed Nigeria years back that they will be executing some of them, and Nigeria had appealed, like others had appealed. So I do not think they made a formal communication as that a few days ago as to whether they will be executing if they haven't already executed.
Now we have the human rights groups also calling for the government of Indonesia to drop its capital punishment penalties. Is this forging ahead at all?
I think it's going to be very difficult, because I know the role Nigeria played in this quest to have a second chance for some of them, but Indonesia has been adamant. What they will do thereafter, nobody can predict, but the President Widodo said he wants to save his country from the evils of drug trafficking, and that he will go ahead. And he also said that majority of the people of his country support the death penalty. So really one cannot predict, and life is about hope. So as long as they are alive, they still remain optimistic that maybe something may just happen and the others may be saved. But we also must stress, as I said earlier, that we also should learn to obey the laws of other countries. And really, the number of Nigerians there is actually embarrassing. 21 so far convicted for drugs in Indonesia. It's a high number, and that should worry us as a nation.
A special advisor to the President on Diaspora and Foreign Affairs, Abike Dabiri Erawa, I want to thank you so much indeed for talking to us on the News at 10. Moving on to other stories now. Drama at the Senate today during the screening of ambassadorial nominees, as some candidates faltered when they were asked to recite the national anthem. There were also candidates who failed to recite the national pledge. Out of the 47 names sent by President Muhammadu Buhari, only 15 have been screened.
To the nominees, ambassadorial nominees, first of all, as you go forward, I believe that you are taking positions at a very important time in the history of our country. A lot of expectations around the world for our ambassadors, for the Nigeria that we have today. And I believe that by your antecedent, your experiences, that I believe that you have the capacity to be able to keep the flag flying. Being our ambassadors, representing 170 million people, representing the largest economy in Africa, representing a country today that is seen as one that is a key player in today's global world and global politics. I think you have a lot of responsibilities, and I want to appeal to you all to please make us proud, to be patriotic, and more importantly, to be ready for sacrifices. I know some of you have not been to a lot of our missions, but some of us that have traveled around, we know the challenges a lot of our missions are having in order to sustain the work there. So you will go there, and there are a lot of challenges, and I think also there will be need for us to look at things differently when we get to our places.
The President of the Nigerian Senate, Dr. Bukola Saraki. In part two, after the break, federal government to provide more completion of abandoned projects in the 2017 budget. Stay with us.